Hello friends, today we will discuss about the lymphoid tissue. Why this tissue is important, what are the parts of the lymphatic systems, structure of a lymphatic capillary vessel, and we'll know the area of distribution of different lymphatic channels. We'll also see what is a lymph node. We'll also see some of the brief about the central lymphoid organs and peripheral lymphoid organs. We will know the function of lymphatic system as well and some of the clinical entities that are related with the lymphatic tissue. Basically, what is a lymph? So lymph is a extracellular fluid that is not drained by the veins and that is drained by the lymphatic vessels. So you can say that this is an accessory extracellular fluid which is not drained via the pathway of the veins. Generally veins drain the tissue fluid which is there. The arteries supply the blood and whatever is collected from the veins, but the remnants of or the remains of what is not drained by the vein is drained by the lymph. The coarse type of substances such are the big size cholesterol, fats, proteins, they are absorbed through the lymphatic vessels, and it is generally a colorless because it doesn't contain color pigment or RBCs for that matter. Red blood cells are not seen normally in the lymph, and that is why the lymphatic fluid or the lymph is colorless. It appears at times milky white in certain locations such as intestinal lymphatics, and the smaller lymphatic vessels which are the beginning of this are known as lacteals. So lacteals are the smallest lymphatic capillaries present in the mucosa of the intestine, and they absorb the nutrients from the digestive system, and they contain fairly high amount of the cholesterol, and that is why it appears milky white and also known as chyle. So chylus or chyle is related to the lymphatic fluid which is in the intestine, and because of the abundance of the cholesterol it appears milky white. It's drained back to the systemic circulation via the veins. So basically many people they just they are not aware of the lymph and where it is draining back, or what is the function of the lymph, what does it have in it. So it's a tissue fluid, so it may have some of the RBCs, some of the WBCs, some of the the cells which are carried from the tissue fluid, and some abnormal cells if at all present in the body. So lymph is very important and it is drained back into the systemic circulation. Large lymphatic channels drain into the venous angle at the root of the neck. So remember, venous angle is very important, and this is the angle formed between the subclavian and the internal jugular vein at the root of the neck. So at least this much you should know about the lymph, where it is present, where it is drained back. In this diagram you can see the lymphatic system and generally how they are present. In the tissue spaces you get the lymphatic fluid draining back into this lymphatic capillaries, and on the pathway to this you have the filtering organs called as lymph nodes located there, and these channels drain back again into the venous system. So venous system is the one that again retrieves your lymphatic fluid and it gets back to your heart, okay, right side of the heart where the veins generally open, okay, and you can observe the arteries ending into the arterial capillaries and the veins starting there, and these veins are joined further at the root of the neck by the big lymphatic ducts which are there. We'll see the names of that again in the next slide. So this is in all the fluid coming back into the circulation, but it is a different pathway, okay. This is the middle of the artery, I would say the vein, and then you have the lymph. So remaining part of the tissue fluid it carries back. What are the parts of the lymphoid system? You have to know this, and this may be asked as a short note for the 2 marks or a 4 mark or 5 mark question. So lymph capillaries, lymphatic vessels, central lymphoid organs, peripheral lymphoid organs. Okay, these are the parts. What are lymphoid capillaries? Are the collecting initial channels, a very small lumen, a singular wall layer, that is the epithelium, that is not exactly as like your blood capillaries, but lymphatic capillaries are a little bit fragile. Okay, and this capillaries begin and they join into the lymphatic vessels. Some are superficial, some are deep. Superficial will run along the superficial blood vessels, and they are likely to be the veins. Okay, so they will run along with the superficial veins. The deep vessel generally run along the deeper arteries or some big deep veins if they are running along with the arteries. So this neurovascular bundle in the vessels, they will also have some lymphatic vessels. You have central lymphoid organs, which are the primary lymphoid organs, which gives rise to the lymphocytes. Their maturation is done in this central lymphoid organs, and the peripheral lymphoid organs, as and when they are needed, there is a accumulation of extra lymphocytes, and some are already residing there and they will regenerate those lymphocytes. So peripheral lymphoid organs are again the collection of lymphoid tissue in the peripheral part of the body, and where you generally have the mature cells already residing, waiting for something, to stimulate them. So lymphatics are absent in some of the tissues. Okay, so bone marrow doesn't have the lymphatics. Your central nervous system, brain and spinal cord generally lack the lymphatics, and some cellular organs like spleen, they also lack the lymphatics. So few of the organs only they lack the lymphatics. Okay, so this is a hand drawn diagram, a schematic, and you can observe a body with a limb, the lower limb, upper limb, the trunk, the head, the neck part, and what you observe, the blue color are the great veins of the head, neck and the upper limb, and at the junction of this you see a green colored structure opening there, and this big structure is nothing but a lymphatic duct, and the biggest lymphatic duct in the body is also known as thoracic duct. Second number is this right lymphatic duct, because it drains only the upper right half of the body, this upper quadrant of the body. Okay, on the right side is drained at this right venous angle called as the junction of your internal jugular and the subclavian, whereas the left is more important, because you can say 3/4 of the body, whole of this area, lower limb, your thorax, even some left part and the lower part, and whole of the abdomen and the left side of your upper limb and head, neck, face, left side, this 3/4 area is all drained into this thoracic duct. This thoracic duct finally drains at the left venous angle at the junction of the left internal jugular and the left subclavian vein. It begins at the upper end of the something called as cisterna chyli. The cisterna chyli is a notable thing in the abdomen at the around L1 level. This is located, and at the upper end of this, there is the beginning of a big lymphatic vessel which is draining whole of the lymphatic fluid which is collected in this cisterna chyli, which is a lymphatic sac present in the abdomen, draining whole of the abdomen, some part of the thoracic, some part or the whole of the lower limb. This is finally drained into the systemic veins at this left venous angle. So these are the locations of your big lymphatics which are there. What is exactly the function of lymphatic system in general? This is it's an important component of immune system, And yes, this is the most significant part. Okay, immune system is, it's a component of immune system. This is the defense of the body. And what more important you want in the body other than the defense? So yes, filters blood and lymph. Yes, it's act as a filtering organ. Many of the organs, they filter the blood and the lymph. Okay, and they produce the immune response, as we have already seen, it's a component. And they may be cellular response, or there may be a humoral or antibody response. It drains the interstitial fluid back to the blood. You cannot leave the extra fluid at the tissue spaces. It will start to swell up, producing the edema. And that is why this function is also a very important function. Bringing back the interstitial tissue fluid back to the blood and into the circulation is very, very important, because without this competent function you cannot have the normal functioning of the body. Okay, so yes, these are all the functions, you should be aware of this. Without these cell tissues, your lymphatic system won't work. And what are these immunity cells? These are the B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes. B lymphocytes are responsible for the production of the antibodies, and they will be transformed into the plasma cells, which are eventually producing the antibodies, the substances that will bind with the antigens, and they will neutralize them. Okay. T lymphocytes, they are cellular, having the cellular response. They are responsible for this cellular response. How? The helper cells, cytotoxic, and different groups of the cell, suppressor cells, they'll be responsible for the direct action on the invading agent. Okay. Some cells are called as natural killer cells. They are again a component of phagocytic system. They will engulf the antibody bound antigens. Okay, so once they neutralize the antigens with antibody, so they have to be engulfed and taken care inside the body by the natural killer cells. So these are the main active cells in the lymphatic system. Some supporting cells, some supporting elements are there in the lymphatic system. And what are those? The most important you should remember is the reticular fibers or the reticular cells. There are something called as epithelio-reticular cells in few of the organs, dense connective tissue which are forming their support from the outside, and the interior at times is the dense connective tissue which form the capsule and the septa or the trabeculae. The fat is there in the supporting element, because as with the advanced age you will find that lymphoid tissue is replaced by the yellow fat. Okay, so this fat is again a component of the lymphatic system. So remember, B cells, T cells, that is the B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte, and the natural killer cell are major responsible active elements, and supporting elements are too many. Reticular fibers provide the support for this, the cells which are laying down there, and they are forming different organs or the component of the lymphatic systems. There are few differences between the lymphatic vessels and the blood vessels. What are those? The lymphatic vessels are appearing colorless, they are more fragile, their wide lumen is present there, they have endothelium but it is loose, and basement membrane is leaky. They have comparatively low pressure than the blood vessels, and they are blind at the beginning. So they begin at the blind end and they will open into the venous end. Whereas blood vessels are red because of the RBCs, they are strong, they are comparatively having narrow lumen. Their endothelium is compact as it should be normally, and their basement membrane is intact, it is not a leaky one. High pressure is present in the blood vessels, okay, as compared to especially the lymphatic vessels. Opening at the both ends, yes, one end at the capillaries, okay, and the other at we would say the arterial end. So there is no blind end. Okay, arterial and venous end are there in the blood vessels always. Okay, and it communicates with the arterial and venous end, that is true. So basic difference between the lymphatic vessel and blood vessel is in the appearance is the color. One is colorless, other is having a red color appearance. The second difference is in the lumen. One is having narrow, other is having wide. And one's endothelium and basement membrane are that not that much strong. So lymphatic vessel is little bit weaker. It is colorless and it is having wide lumen. That is why it permeates the high molecular weight substance to come into that and get into the circulation later on. So that difference has to be there, and that is why we have different set of vessels carrying those kind of the materials which are not drained back normally by the thin lumen venous capillaries. So lymphatic nodule again having a peripheral zone and a central zone. The peripheral is also known as mental zone that has mature B lymphocyte, where a germinal center is in the center and it contains a lymphoblast, and that is why it's a euchromatic large pale nucleus showing zone, because it is a highly mitotic zone continuously producing lymphocytes are there. In the primary lymphatic nodule, you don't see germinal center, they are very immature nodules. Okay, no germinal center. Whereas in the secondary, you will see a germinal center. So why lymphoblasts appear? Because of the exposure to the antigens. They need to produce at a high rate so as to combat the coming antigen inside that lymphatic nodule, and that is why the primary transforms into the secondary lymphatic nodule with the appearance of the germinal center. See, you can observe the lymphatic nodule in the center appears pale with the lymphoblast in the germinal center, and in the mental zone you have a mature B lymphocytes. So this kind of round tissue is the lymphatic nodule. Diffuse versus dense lymphoid tissue. This is another thing mentioned in many of the books. Okay. Now, what is the diffuse tissue? It's a diffusely presence of your lymphocyte in a particular long structure and beneath a long epithelium, which is constantly exposed to the antigens. Like you have something in the digestive system, gut associated lymphoid tissue. It should be a T here. So gut associated lymphoid tissue and mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, especially present in the respiratory zone. What is the gut associated? Wherever you have stomach, esophagus, intestine, and in that wall you have presence of lymphocyte just to combat the incoming antigens with the food material. In the respiratory tract, you want to combat something coming with the air passages, and that two types of tissue are GALT and MALT, galt and malt. Okay, so gut associated and mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, you have to remember at times they are present just to trap the antigens and just to neutralize them. Lymph nodules are there dispersed in many sites in the body. Okay, whereas many of the tissues, they have dense collection of the lymphoid tissue and they form the different organs, secondary lymphoid organ. Okay, and some are primary. They are structured collection in organs. They are very densely arranged and they have capsule or a particular kind of support of few of the fibers, like the spleen or thymus. These are just the example of what is a diffuse and what is a dense lymphoid tissue. Now observe under the microscope. If you observe schematically, we have shown here in the gut associated lymphoid tissue, this is a lumen, and through the lumen if something passes deeper down, you have such collection of cells called as lymphoid cells, and these cells will attack those antigens here only. So such presence of lymphoid tissue in the gut wall, it is known as gut associated lymphoid tissue, whereas you see the epithelium in the respiratory tract, beneath that basement membrane in the lamina propria, again you will see lot of lymphoid tissue which are there, and if the air contains pathogens are entering into this area, they will be taken care by this lymphoid tissue which is present in the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Okay. Lymphoid organs are two types, primary and secondary, or they are also called central and peripheral. Primary will contain immature lymphocytes and they'll be matured in the respective primary organs. If they are matured in the bone marrow, they are B lymphocytes, and if they are matured in the thymus, they'll be called as T lymphocytes. See, thymus is responsible for the cellular immunity. Your thymocytes or your T lymphocytes are matured in the thymus. They are released in the circulation if they are not autoreactive to your body tissues. This is known as immunotolerance. If you expose your body antigens into the thymus, the developing T lymphocytes don't react to that and they react to the other tissues which are foreign, they'll be taken into the circulation. They will be the mature T lymphocytes. If they react to your own tissues, they'll be apoptotized, that will be undergo degeneration. They'll be taken care by the apoptosis. They'll be vanished. They'll not be selected for the release into the circulation, and such phenomenon is taking place in the thymus, where you have suddenly the maturity lymphocytes which are capable of recognizing the antigens which are foreign but not our own as foreign. If this accidentally does not happen and you release few of the cells which are recognizing our own body cells as the foreign, we call such condition as autoimmune disorder. B lymphocytes are matured in the bone marrow. They are responsible for the antibody production. Secondary lymphoid organs are too many, and we will study in the details of the histology part these organs, how do they appear and all, but as a prototype we are studying today the lymph node. Okay, because you will very soon come to know the lymph node in the dissection hall. So the spleen is the largest lymphoid organ, where too many lymphoid collection is there. Lymph nodes are the other organ, tonsils are there, appendix is there, mature lymphocytes are present in this lymphoid organ. Okay, no maturity will be given here, already mature lymphocytes will be there. Okay, what is the lymph node? It is a secondary lymphoid organ which has a capsule with many afferent lymphatic vessels entering in it. It has a subcapsular sinus, trabecular sinus, medullary sinuses, which are connective tissue bound spaces through which the lymphatic fluid is poured on the lymph nodes. So in the lymph nodes we'll call, because lymph nodes have those afferent vessels coming into it, and they'll be filtered and they'll be taken care. Okay, so one efferent lymphatic vessel is always present, which will be taking out the filtered lymphatic fluid. It has a cortex, a paracortex with a high endothelial venous, which helps in the filtration of the lymph and trapping of the some of the abnormal cells. It also has a medulla which contains lot of blood vessels entering in it and leaving it. It houses all kinds of lymphoid cells. So lymph node contains all kinds of lymphoid cells. This is a schematic of the lymphoid organ, a lymph node, how it appears. It has a connective tissue capsule over which you have the inside that penetrating is the afferent lymphatic vessels, along with the trabeculae, which are the extension of this capsule. You divide this lymphatic node into different areas, and this capsule has extension inside this lymph node called as trabeculae, and surrounding those capsule you have a subcapsular sinus. Surrounding those trabeculae you have the trabecular sinus. So this is the trabecular sinus, this is the subcapsular sinus, where you have the passage of lymphatic fluid coming. These cells which are residing in this lymph node sense what is wrong, or if something is not correct in that incoming lymphatic vascular fluid, and they'll filter it out. They'll be taking care inside this zone only of the antigen. If you go little bit deeper, you have a paracortex. Paracortex contain high endothelial venules, which contains a moderately larger endothelial cells, which are sometimes low cuboidal. They call it as low cuboidal epithelium or high endothelial venules, and they will again help in the filtering of the incoming fluid into the lymphatic node. And these blood vessels in the medulla, you call it as the blood vessels. The blood capillaries are entering and exiting through the lymph node at the hilum of the lymph node, and one efferent lymph vessel will always take care whatever is coming inside like this is going through this out through the efferent lymphatic vessel. Now see, there are zones of this lymphatic node. This lymph node has a cortex, a paracortex, and a medulla. The paracortex is rich in the lymphatic nodule, which has as we have already seen the B lymphocytes. The paracortex has T lymphocytes collection, and the medulla has the trabecular, the medullary cords with the B as well as T lymphocytes which are there. So this contains mixed population. This is largely everywhere, every cell is there, but largely T lymphocytes, largely B lymphocytes, and this is a little bit mixed in population is the medulla. Okay. So what are the different zones in the lymph node? A cortex having nodules containing B cells, a deep cortex also known as paracortex with a high endothelial venules, mainly the T cells. The medulla has mixture of cells with the medullary cords of reticular and lymphoid tissue, and it shows medullary sinuses or vascular lumens which are there. As we have seen, the arterial as well as venous capillaries are there. This sinus is finally drained into the cortex, and the lymph is filtered in the corticomedullary direction, as I have already explained to you, and finally it is taken out to the efferent lymphatic vessel. So in the applied anatomy of the lymph node, we have to know lymph nodes undergo the inflammation, and such a condition is known as lymphadenitis, where you have abnormally enlarged or swollen lymph nodes, especially in the axilla, in the inguinal, in the group, in the neck. They are very common in the lymphadenitis. You will be observing some or the other kind of a lymph node enlarged there, generally associated with the fever, the infections, but they may be inflamed because of the some tumor cells invading into that. So you have to suspect two areas. Excuse me. So one could be the infection, other could be the tumor cells, and that will give rise to the lymphadenitis. And lymphedema is swelling of the any tissue secondary to the lymphatic obstruction. Okay, so if there is an obstruction of the lymphatic vessels, the backflow will be stagnant, and it will produce swelling over the skin, in the skin subcutaneous tissue. Wherever it finds a place to accumulate, this lymph will give rise to this swelling, and such a swelling is very common in the lower limb called as elephantiasis, where you have swollen legs as a result of the obstruction to the lymphatic vessels. And Wuchereria bancrofti, this is a filarial parasite. This is the most common invading agent, especially active at the night. So this elephantiasis is a disorder produced as the result of swollen, obstruction to the lymphatic vessel, and elephant like legs, swollen legs are there in this condition. You will have cancer metastasis at times associated with this lymphatics, because this is a major way of spreading the tumor cell. Okay, so tumor cells are again sprayed with this lymphatics, and this is a major pathway how many of the carcinomas are spread in the body, known as metastasis. And such cells can also be trapped in the lymphatic tissue lymph nodes, giving rise to the lymphadenitis. And such lymph nodes which are firstly involved or most commonly involved in any kind of pathology, we call those group of lymph nodes as the sentinel lymph node. We have seen in the today's session all these lymphatic system, the capillaries, the ducts, their area of distribution, what is the lymph node, what are different lymphotic or lymphatic organs, what are the importance of the lymphatic tissue, what is the function of that, and few of your applied anatomy points which you need to be aware of this lymphatic tissue. So stay tuned, keep visiting, and like, subscribe, and do comment in the section how you feel about these lectures and how we can improve on. Thank you so much.